Shalom, shalom. Right, it's the brother Shema with all. Want to give all honor and glory to the Most High God Yahweh, Bahashem, Hamashah, Wamalak, Hatazadak, Yahweh Shah. Right, all praise to the Most High. Come with you with a short lesson. Right, none too long, none too crazy. And the lesson is balance. It's all about balance. No overindulging, no overeating, overstudying. Right, let's get the precept. Proverbs chapter 25, verse 16. It says, "Hast thou found honey? Eat so much as is sufficient for thee, lest thou be filled therewith and vomit." So why the Lord say this? Right? Eat so much as sufficient for thee, lest thou filled therewith and vomit. If brothers ever ate honey so much, you will vomit. You can look it up yourselves. I got something quick, right? Something quick pulled up, off the internet. It says, yes, eating too much honey can potentially lead to vomiting, especially in certain situations. I even experienced it myself, right? And it's not really going into physical honey as well. It's spiritual, right? Reading the words of the Lord, right? You're studying, you're getting into the Hebrew, you're in prophecy, and you don't want to indulge in something too much to the point where you can't retain it, right? You just vomit it all up. Let's read that again. It says, "Hast thou found honey? Eat so much as sufficient for thee." So have a balance, right? In its truth, you're required to have a balance. The Lord has a balance. Evil, good, right? You have the sun and the moon, right? It's a balance. The way how the Lord created the earth, everything has a balance. You can't have just all good when you gotta have the evil, right? Let's get that. Think about two precepts at the same time. Let's get Sirach chapter 33 and verse 14. It says, "Good is set against evil, and life against death." Because you need, through the spirit, you need death, right? But they say it's a saying. It says, before the beginning, there's destruction. Because ultimately, for you to either be a good man, a good woman, or teenager, child, you have to break down and destroy the old habits, your old self, to be able to become that new man. So it says, good is set against evil, and life against death. So is the godly against the sinner, and the sinner against the godly. That is the perfect balance that the Lord created. Read on, it says, "So look upon all the works of the Most High, and there are two and two, one against another." So there's always one against another. There's always two and two. There's always a just balance. So when we go back to Proverbs 25, it says, "Hast thou found honey?" Because when you come in this truth, it's sweet. It's very sweet. You learn, you find out Christ, a so-called black man. You see that the Most High chose you, and you got salvation. All the things that you've done in the world, you can repent for. It's very sweet. You got a brotherhood, It's very sweet. You found out you have a chance to live forever, the kingdom. It's a beautiful, beautiful thing. It's very sweet, right? It says, "Hast thou found honey? Eat so much as sufficient for thee." So you don't want to have too much mirth. You don't want to have too much sorrow, right? You don't want to study, and you're not retaining nothing. You're not giving your mind a so-called type of rest to be able to digest the things you eat, because your mind is your belly. So if your mind is your belly, why would you overindulge, right? So when it says, "Hast thou found honey? Eat so much as sufficient for thee, lest thou be filled therewith and vomit." Right, let's get another precept, same chapter. Proverbs 25, verse 27. Right, it says, "It is not good to eat much honey." So the Lord letting you know, it is not good to always just in prophecy. It's not good always to just, all you doing is talking about the how the kingdom is going to be, right? the streets paved with gold. You know, you're gonna live forever, and you're gonna dwell with the beast, and you don't always want to dwell into that. Also, get into the destruction. You don't want to always keep indulging in destruction too. You know, so a perfect balance. It says, it is not good to eat much honey. So for man to search their own glory is not glory. Because you got to be careful, man. Because what are you so studying hard for? You know, is it to feed the flock? You know, you got to control your zeal, because too much zeal can get you overthrown, right? So what you studying for? Are you want the vain glory? You trying to make a name for yourself? Are you really sincere? Because, you know, it's not good to eat much honey, right? But if you doing that through the Spirit, you studying and you want to learn all the dark parables and things of that manner, you will destroy yourself, you know? And that's what you want to be. Hey, best believe, you know, the Lord going to expose you. Let's get that. Because that's not sincere. You learning everything is not to edify the sheep. It's not that you actually love the Lord and you've been away from your heritage who God knows how long. You know, that's not what you studying for. You know, you're studying for just vanity, to make a name for yourself. This is Sirach chapter 1, verse 30. It says, verse 29, it says, be not a hypocrite in the sight of man, and take good heed what thou speakest. Exalt not thyself, lest thou fall, and bring dishonor upon thy soul. So you're going to bring dishonor upon thy soul because you just want to know the wisdom, the wisdom, knowledge, and understanding of the Lord for your own glory, right? You're going to dishonor you're going to have dishonor upon thy soul. And so Yahweh discover thy secrets and cast thee down in the midst of the congregation. Now you're going to be an embarrassment because you wasn't sincere in this truth. You were studying, you know, trying to gain glory, man. Lord's not dealing with that, right? So most important, the main point is make sure that you have a balance in your life, you know, in its truth. And also, you know, in the world of the habits that you do, because you don't want to do surfetting. Let's get that, right? Actually, let's finish that out. Salaki. Let's finish that out. Right, let's start from the top. Sirach chapter 1, verse 30. It says, exalt not thyself, lest thou fall and bring dishonor upon thy soul. And so Yahweh discover thy secrets and cast thee down in the midst of the congregation, because thou camest not in truth to the fear of the Most High, but thy heart is full of deceit. Your heart is full of deceit. You made it seem like you were studying to edify the sheep. You were studying to teach. You were studying to teach yourself. But you really just want to be, you know, have a name. You want to be the best Israelite, the best Judite, Issacharite, Zebulonite. You want to be above the leader of the congregation. That's madness, man. So now you're going to be ashamed. It says, because thou camest not in truth to the fear of the Lord. That's madness, man. You didn't have fear of the Lord. You had fear of not knowing anything. You had a fear of, oh man, I ain't gonna be that dude. That's madness. But let's get that. So ultimately, another point is, you know, you gotta have balance in things you do in the world as well. Right? Let's just get that. Nice little quick one. Luke 21. Luke 21, verse 34. It says, and take heed to yourselves, lest at any time your hearts be overcharged with surfeiting, right? And drunkenness. How your hearts be overcharged with surfeiting? When is your mind? You're overindulging things in the world. You're abusing it. You should have a balance. You don't want to be, you know, you're playing basketball for damn 10 hours, but you haven't read and studied for at least 2 to 3. You only threw a one prayer all day. You hooping for 10 hours. You playing a game for 6 hours. You barely prayed, barely read, barely studied. That's madness. So it says, And take heed to yourselves, lest at any time your hearts be overcharged with surfeiting and drunkenness, right? And it don't necessarily can be in the word. It could be other doctrines and philosophies. You just dipping and dabbing. Too much study for your own glory. Because it was so sweet to you or what you found out, right? And cares of this life. And so that day come upon you unaware. What day? Yahweh Bashem Yahushua, the famine, Jacob's trouble, seditions of men, martial law. That come upon you unaware because the cares of this life. So you got to have a balance in your life, man. Right? Let's go to Proverbs. Let's go to the classic Proverbs chapter 11. Right? Proverbs chapter 11. Proverbs chapter 11, verse 1. It says, a false balance is abomination to the Lord. It's a false balance. You know, a false balance is abomination to the Most High. So if you overindulging in the world, you saying, oh, I gotta work out, I gotta make sure whatever that may be that you do. Hey, the Lord, that's an abomination to the Lord because you don't have a balance. You don't have a balance in your studying. You know, you don't have a balance just in your life. The Lord requires balance. And if the firmament, the creation, the elements has a balance, because obviously everything has a season, there's a balance in the seasons. You know, it rains when it needs to rain. It's hot when it needs to be hot. It snows when it needs to be snow, right? Everything has a balance. So if it doesn't have a balance, it's a false abomination to the Lord. Not false, but it's a false balance. False balance is abomination to the Lord. Salakia. It's a false balance if you don't have balance within your life, right? So let's get that. I want another precept that came to mind through the Spirit, right? Salakia. There's another precept, Lord, when it come to mind, right? Lord willing, it come to mind. All right, Lord willing, lost track. Right? Hey, Most High willing. But, you know, the main point of this video is have a balance. Don't do too much studying. Don't do too much reading when you need to have, you know, application of the precepts. Don't go into too much precepts when you need to do some reading or go into the history. You know, and it takes time, right? That's what I wanted. Sirach chapter, all praise to the Most High, right? Because, hey, the Lord said, eat what is sufficient for you. Because on a carnal level, brothers eat. Brothers gluttoning. You're gluttoning through the Spirit. Brothers do that carnally. You just eat. Beef, chicken, lamb. You know what I'm saying? You just going crazy on the lamb. You've been eating beef all week. You've been eating sweets all week. Jake eating, Jake could eat honey buns for the rest of his life if he could, man. Jake could eat hot country crust the rest of his life if he could. You know, that's madness. You know, can't be freaking off with the dietary law. Right, so this Sirach chapter 31, verse 19, it says, a very little is sufficient for a man will nurture. Right? So a very little is sufficient for a man well nurtured. So you don't want to just indulge in chicken, but you're not getting no fruit. You don't want to be indulging in just sweets when you have vegetables. You got to have a balance. It says a very little is sufficient for a man well nurtured, and he fetcheth not his wind short upon his bed. Because now you're going to start to have trouble waking up. You're not going to have trouble breathing. This is through the Spirit. When you overindulge in studying, you can't really retain. You got a headache. You feel a sharp pain. You feel nausea, right? Hey, the Lord is telling you very little is sufficient, right? Let's read on. Verse 20. Sound sleep coming from moderate eating. Two brothers and sisters that eat so much. And you wonder why you can't go to sleep. You wonder why you can't wake up at a certain time because you're overindulging in eating. You eating late at night. You waking up at 12 in the morning eating loaded fries. 12 at midnight eating loaded fries. That's madness, right? It says he riseth early and his wits are with him, but the pain of watching and troller and pegs of the belly are with an unstable man. They said pegs of the belly. That's that peg of the belly when you got a headache from studying all day. You then end up passing out. Have a balance, right? So all praise to the Most High. I'm going to go back to Proverbs 25. So have a balance in your life. Whether that's you work out. Because first and foremost, it really is just really going into studying. Because you don't want to overindulge in studying. Make sure you have a balance of going to bread and milk, the wine, things of that matter. So Proverbs 25. Let's go to it again. Verse 16. It says, hast thou found honey? Eat so much as is sufficient for thee, lest thou be filled therewith and vomited. Right? So most High willing, this was edifying, to the Akim and Akiwath. All praise to Yahweh. Bashem Mashiach, Woman like Yahweh Shai. Kwame Shalom.